Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. As always, I am your host, Josh Amick, with my panel, Fritz, John, Mark, and Ian. A lot of stuff to get into this week, but not so much looking ahead. So we're going to try to do a little bit of a deeper dive this week over what happened the past weekend. Let's start off with the Sacramento State and Weber State game. That was a crazy game where Weber State missed a field goal in the second overtime and ended up losing that game. Is this a game that Sacramento State can build off of, or is there still a lot for them to clean up? What do you think on this, Ian?
I'd say probably more the latter. They got a little lucky in that one, blowing, what was it, like a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter there. Obviously a huge momentum swing on that pick six where they tried like the double pass, or the receiver took it and tried to throw it to the quarterback, and great defensive play by Weber State. But I mean, in that fourth quarter, Sac State's offense went 3 and out twice, and then had another drive where they had 4 plays and then also had to punt. So definitely a lot to learn from that game. Probably want to emphasize a little more of their running game. I think when I was looking at their just kind of where they stack up in the conference, they were at like 10th in rushing offense. So to be able to close out games like that, you have to be able to run the ball. So that's something that I imagine they're probably going to be taken away from this one.
Yeah, I'd have to jump in there too and talk about a little bit about their rushing defense as well. I mean, they gave up 316 yards to Weber on the ground this last week, and then the week before against Eastern, they almost gave up 300. So that's 600 yards in the past 2 games is not ideal, especially in the Big Sky where rushing offenses are pretty prominent. So yeah, that pick six was massive in the game. 14-point swing. They're knocking on the door to make it a 24-point game, and instead it's down to 10. So that changed the momentum. But you got to look for Weber too. They had chances to close this out. They had some turnovers again. They missed kicks early in the season. This year this last game, they're on the doorstep of the goal line with time running out, and Sac State's defense holds up 3 times and forces the tying field goal instead. So I think both teams definitely have things to work on, but if you're Sac State, you got to be happy with getting out of there with a win.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's dipping into the Jason Eck trick play playbook. It seems like it's like, guy had a 17-point lead, just finish the darn game, and then they try a pass like that, changes the whole complexion of the game, and then they're lucky to get out with a win. Then you look at the other stuff you guys mentioned, Weber rushing for 316 yards against them. So obviously Sac State's got a little bit to clean up there as well. But so it's, they're, like you said, it's lucky they got out of it with the win, but yeah, they got to clean up that rushing defense.
The game didn't really build confidence in either team with me. I just, I thought it was another one of those weird Weber losses, Kyle Thompson kicked that field goal to send it overtime and become Weber's career scoring leader, and then he misses one in overtime that seals the game for Sac State. Bankson had 234 rushing yards and 25 carries, yet they couldn't punch it in regulation right there at the end, having the ball inside the 5-yard line. And I don't know, just Weber, they got that signature win in Missoula, and they've dropped 2 straight since. Those hangovers are only supposed to last a week, not 2 weeks. So both these teams are going to be just on the outside of the playoffs looking in. One of them will be ahead of the other one, but I can't really call it. Credit to Sac State. Conklin had a great game, throwing for 357. But, yeah, I'm not really sold on either squad right now.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like with both Sacramento State and Weber State, can't really figure them out. They have some good showings, and they have some really head-scratching showings. So yeah, and then also want to give a shout out to we had a YouTube comment a few weeks back asking what's going on with Weber State's kicker, because he has been so good, as Fritz mentioned. But I don't know if this game gives you any sort of solace in that fact. I don't know what's going on with that kicker, so they need to get that figured out. Moving on to Idaho State and NAU, that was another great game with NAU's late game interception sealing the win for them. How impressed were you with NAU and how they made that erase that deficit in the fourth quarter, John?
The fourth quarter comeback is definitely impressive to where it deal with what you've gone through the game, and the offenses were not showing up on either side in the first half after NAU's first drive, where they turned it over on downs. I think the next drives were punt, 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 maybe a field goal mixed in there, but it was a lot of no offense in that first half. So for both teams to just kind of get the offenses rolling in that second quarter through to the third, and for NAU getting 2 touchdowns to start that fourth quarter is big, the comeback. But in terms of being impressed, I'm more disappointed in how, we've talked about this year how they play at 7,000 feet. They need to take advantage of that home field advantage. I know Fritz has mentioned that multiple times. And again, they come out against a team that they should be beating at home, and it takes a fourth quarter comeback to get the win.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that would have been a pretty devastating loss. I mean, they jump out on them 10-0, then they find themselves down 23-16. Ty Pennington was back at quarterback. That's good news for them going forward. That unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the ISU offensive lineman down there on the 5-yard line at the end of the game obviously is a real killer. I mean, I haven't seen it, but I'd be curious to know what happened there. But I mean, that takes them from the 5 back to the 20, and it turns whatever they were going to do from the 5 into kind of a desperation pass from the 20. So, but yeah, NAU, I mean, if they have any postseason aspirations, I mean, they need to take care of these games a little better than they are.
Yeah, that old lineman must not have been gassed if he had the breath to get a personal foul right at the critical moment like that. But yeah, John kind of stole my thunder. I was once again going to beat that dead horse where NAU, playing at 7,000 feet, they need to be able to wear down people and win games. And I guess they did. ISU couldn't stop them on their final drive, but then they weren't really stopping ISU in that final drive until the Bengals stopped themselves, and that was they threw a pick in the end zone with no time left from the 20. Till then it had been like a 77-yard drive. So I think NAU might be something to be reckoned with when they choose playoffs at the end, playoff teams. But in a WW, winning's a lot harder than losing, so I'll give credit to NAU for that, but wasn't super impressed.
Yeah, I'm kind of all in agreement here. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, but good for NAU to see them win a close game after a couple close losses the last couple of weeks. I think it was 6 points against Idaho, and Montana's score was like 11 points, but that game was a lot closer than that final score. So good to see him win one of these close ones or after these last couple.
All right, another good game last week was Idaho escaping with the win against Cal Poly, which was kind of a shocker, but a good sign for Idaho is they might have got the best quarterback play they've had all year with all the injuries they've had, with Wagner playing really good. With that being said, do you think the health of the Idaho Vandals defense is going to be their biggest concern or their biggest challenge for the rest of the season, Mark?
Well, I mean, they're pretty healthy now. I mean, they're going to need their defense. I think a bigger concern is the offense. I mean, two of their top 3 quarterbacks are out with broken collarbones, although they're saying Jack Lane might be back this week. 2 of their 2 top running backs didn't play last week, and we're not sure if they'll get them back this week. So I think the health of the offense is a bigger concern. I know Wagner had a pretty good game. They had a slow start for whatever reason. Sounded like Jason Eck just basically kicked them in the butt at halftime, and they came out and played a little better in the second half. I mean, you look at who they got. Last year they had 2 wide receivers that were in NFL camps. This year they got 2 freshmen and a sophomore, so that they're pretty good wide receivers, but it's not the same, and Wagner's maybe not the same quite as Giovanni McCoy. So but still, to whatever he threw for, 327 or whatever he threw for, that's still pretty good, and their wide receivers are still pretty good. But I think they need to be a little healthier on offense if they want to keep it going.
Yeah, do we call Wagner their second quarterback or their fourth quarterback? Because he was on the bench before Joseph got hurt last week, and man, he played well. And whatever they did in the second half on offense, they should bottle it. 319 yards by my count, and that's including a couple drives that ended in turnovers, a fumble and an interception. And like Mark said, yeah, I think the defense is good. We shouldn't judge that defense by the Montana State game alone because the Cats are the Cats this year. They seem pretty unstoppable. So I think Idaho is kind of trending up. I think they get a chance to get even a little healthier here, and they're still one to watch. I know 3 losses, quarterback, musical chairs. They're still a team to be reckoned with.
Mark mentioned that the slow start they had, it was good to see them rally from that and put up 21 in the third quarter. And then, like Fritz mentioned, just got to bottle up that second half offensive success and bring that into next game, which, I mean, might end up being a shootout, kind of like it was last year. So we'll see. But yeah, good to see them rebound from what was really a slow and kind of surprising first half there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to add from what everyone's kind of said. The second half was solid offensively for them last week, and and you get a win, you get that bounce back too. I don't know how much maybe that Montana State game was lingering in their heads, but they didn't let it affect the end result, I guess I should say. But yeah, this week against with Eastern coming to town, definitely should be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, Mark, I know you're the Idaho guy. Is there any word on the health of their 2 running backs?
I was trying to listen in on their presser today, and it sounded like they might get Cummings back, but college football being what it is, there's no injury report, so nobody ever knows until you show up Saturday and you see who's out there in the field. There's always a lot of times it's a big surprise.
Yeah, looking at these stats, it looks like they did get pretty decent production from Art Williams, who Mark mentioned is their third guy, average at 5.7 yards a carry, 86 yards, not bad. And then Wagner was super impressive, in my opinion, 17 to 23, 347, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Like Fritz mentioned, those couple of turnovers, the game might have looked a lot different from the Vandals and wouldn't have been so close with Cal Poly, which is a team who has struggled most of the season. So moving on to a game where we all thought was going to be a shootout, ended up being exactly just that, with UC Davis and Eastern shooting out to 48-38, UC Davis pulling off the win at the red turf. Is Larson poised to be the returning a repeat Big Sky Player of the Year, or is there someone else in mind that we should be looking out for, Fritz?
Well, I think Tommy Malott might have something to say about it, but man, Larson's awfully good, and he was a preseason pick as well. Not that ever means anything. It's funny. We were all working Saturday, but I was listening to the Eastern game on the radio and got the Eastern feed, and they were feeling pretty good about themselves because it was 3-0 and Larson hadn't done much, and then whoops, there he went, 53 yards, and pretty soon it's 14-3, and pretty soon it's 28-9, and 48-38 doesn't really illustrate how close that game was. It wasn't that close, I didn't think. Yeah, Larson's a real deal. I think it's up between him and Tommy Malott. And Eastern just continues to hemorrhage yards, 549 they gave up on Saturday. So a lot of work to do still in Cheney.
Yeah, Fritz mentioned Malott. I had a different Bobcat that kind of jumped out to me. Maybe Scott Trey Humphrey. 6 of his 8 games have been over 100 yards, and I mean he's got the touchdown so far. So I mean the leading rusher on a run-heavy offense like that, that probably jumps out a little bit. But Larson obviously had a great game. I think it was over 250 total yards, both on the ground and through the air. Only got that 1 touchdown though, which is a little surprising when he's going for over 250. But yeah, when we were talking about this game last week, I noted how I'd like to see Eastern run the ball a little bit more. They tried to run the ball a little bit more, but they only gained 81 yards on 34 attempts. So just wasn't in the cards for them on Saturday.
Yeah, everybody who I've marked down has already been mentioned. I was thinking, Larson, of course, has got to be in the mix for it. Tommy Malott with 17 passing touchdowns. He's completing 70% of his passes, and he's got 7 rushing touchdowns to add to all that. So, I mean, that's a great season. Plus the Bobcats being 8-0. UC Davis being 7-1. I think that, based on, at least for me, based on what we were thinking at the beginning of the season, is kind of a shocking record. I know they still have some tough games coming up, but he's definitely been one of the keys to keeping the Aggies up at the top of the Big Sky this year. Another player that I think maybe not this year, just because he's not getting the full load. But Eli Gilman, I feel like just with how efficient he is, needs to kind of have his name in that recognition spot. So, but just to kind of throw somebody else out there who hasn't been mentioned, but yeah, I think Scott Trey and Tommy Mellott for Montana State and Land Larson are probably your three favorites right now.
Yeah, it seems like Montana has so many weapons that they almost kind of cancel each other out on a thing like this. Larison was fourth in the league in rushing yards, sixth in receiving. So if you're looking at someone who can do more than one thing, he has, I think he leads in all-purpose yards in the conference. Humphrey and Tolliver and Bankston are all ahead of him rushing, but not too much in the receiving game. Yeah, you kind of forget about Tommy Mellott because they kind of don't want him running as much because they don't want to get him killed. Like he seems like he gets injured every year, and that kills him toward the end of the year. But like Fritz said, he still has 7 touchdowns, so he might be the other competition for Larison there.
I'm a little surprised that nobody gave any love to Miles Hastings, Larison's teammate. I mean, looking at what he's done, completing 68% of his passes, 20 touchdowns on the season, averaging 314 yards through the air. I feel like the Big Sky is kind of known for being a ground and pound type of conference, and Hastings has been airing it out. Another player I was kind of keeping an eye on with their high-powered offense, but I think their record will kind of reflect where their awards go to, is Chisholm from Eastern Washington. He's had a great year receiving. He might easily get 1,000 yards and will be in double-digit touchdowns by the end of the year. So, couple of players to look out for, but UC Davis has definitely been impressive so far this season. The other team who's been more impressive than UC Davis is Montana State, who improved to 8-0 with the win over Portland State. We talked about this throughout the season about how Montana State is most likely going to run the table until they get to playoffs. So to kind of pivot from that point, is there a weakness in Montana State that these other teams who they play can maybe try to expose in future matchups, Ian?
Yeah, maybe this is why I'm not a football coach, but when I look at Montana State, it's just I don't know how you attack them. You can't really slow down their run game, and I mean, if you try, they'll just pick you apart through the air. Defensively, I don't even know what you would try to do, as we saw when they played Idaho a couple weeks ago. I guess the best thing you can do is pray a little bit, maybe try and get a couple turnovers, but I mean, if anyone is going to beat them, it's just going to start with slowing down that running game and getting a couple of maybe fluky turnovers. But yeah, I don't really know how you would even game plan for this team.
It's funny how you bring up fluky turnovers, Ian, because one of the things that I was kind of looking back at, and I went all the way back to week 1, and New Mexico had the couple of scoop-and scores. I guess it was week 0 even, and that they fell behind that way, and you kind of forced them to get away from their running game, which they still stuck to. And Adam Jones broke the 93-yard run to cut it back to 3 at that point, and then they ended up getting the win. But if you could just kind of force them out of that running game, I think that's going to be your best shot, maybe even your only shot, is if you get pressure at the line of scrimmage and maybe force Mellott to have to throw the ball downfield.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on the run game. I mean, you got to take your chances on something. If they can beat you through the air, congrats. The other thing, and it's a tangible thing, is the injuries. I mean, they have 3 guys out with ACLs, or middle linebacker, a defensive back, and a nose tackle. And I don't know how big those losses are, but injuries kind of add up. And we talked about that with Tommy Mellott in previous years when he was at less than 100%. They were at less than 100%. So I hate to say it, but injuries might be the biggest thing that could slow Montana State down.
Yeah, in fact, I think that's the only thing. I think they lost receiver Ty McCullough to injury, to an ankle, I think, Saturday. And one of the guys Mark mentioned is Julia Kepa. He went down with a knee injury. That's the linebacker. He's good.
I wasn't going to pronounce his name.
Well, I ballparked it. And then they didn't play Bryce Gravy last week. And still they roll. And, they've been mauling other teams' defenses without Justice Perkins. I think he's due back. He's one of their big offensive linemen. He's really good. And I think, I guess they're about ready to bring back Julius Davis at running back. They didn't have Adam Jones Saturday. and they didn't play Davis. I think they took him. But now he's got 4 games left, and he can keep a red shirt and play all playoffs, no matter how far they go, and that won't count against him. So, like I think I wrote an article last week, the rich get a little bit richer with Julius Davis, who was second team All Big Sky last year. So, yeah, not a lot of weaknesses, but defenses are a little bit of a concern. I'm sorry, injuries are a little bit of a concern.
All right. John, I do not appreciate you bringing up that week 0 game because I know my picks would look a lot different if New Mexico ended up pulling that off. But anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Join us again Thursday. We'll go over next week's slate of games. Only 3 games scheduled with a lot of teams getting some time off. So we'll try to go into further detail for those 3 matchups. But as always, I want to thank my panel, John, Fritz, Mark, and Ian, for joining us. And we'll see you all on Thursday. Thank you.